Ladies and gentlemen, the grand exit, the one they never saw coming, the plot twist that sent their carefully crafted narrative crumbling into chaos. You, the one they thought they had figured out, flipped the script in a way that left them stunned, gasping for control. They thought you'd stay, endure, and accept their nonsense. But oh, how wrong they were. You gave them something they didn't plan for, the ultimate checkmate, and now their story is nothing but a tragedy of their own making. They assumed you were weak, didn't they? That your love for them was some kind of leash they could tighten and pull as they saw fit. They thought your loyalty was a prison, that your willingness to care was a sign of desperation. But now, they are faced with the truth they never believed would come. You are not the person they imagined, and you never were. Your strength has always been quietly simmering beneath the surface, and now it has erupted. They never realized it was their final opportunity to hold on to you before losing you for good. What a beautiful illusion they held, believing they could walk over you, believing they could trample your spirit, and you would stay, forever begging for their approval. They were too blind, too consumed by their own arrogance to notice the one thing that truly mattered. You. You were never as desperate as they believed you to be. They thought you would cling to them, that you would suffer their abuse, their neglect, their disrespect, and still return for more. They thought you were bound to them, but what they failed to see is that they were the ones trapped. They were trapped by their own egos, their own sense of superiority. They never thought for a second that someone like you could be strong enough to walk away, to cut the ties, to leave behind the lies and the cruelty. But you did. And in doing so, you shattered their world. They thought they had time. They thought you would always be there, waiting, longing for their attention. They never considered that the moment you realized your worth, the moment you saw through their games, would be the last moment they could count on you. They didn't realize that the finality of your departure was inevitable, that you had already made your decision long before they noticed. It wasn't a rash decision. It wasn't done in anger or haste, but with quiet determination, a resolve they could never fathom. You knew that leaving was not a defeat. It was a victory. You took control when they thought they held all the cards. They didn't realize they had given you everything you needed to walk away with strength. The truth is, they never valued you, not really. They never saw the depth of your soul, the power that flowed through you. They were too busy using you, manipulating you, to notice that you were not the fragile, desperate thing they assumed. You were a force of nature, a quiet storm that could not be tamed, and when the time came, you tore through their walls and left them in ruin. And in the silence that followed, they were left to face the consequences of their actions. The silence that once felt like a threat to them now felt like their punishment, for they knew they could never go back to the place where they had the power over you. The saddest part of this is that they don't even understand what they've lost. They thought you would always be there, that your loyalty and affection were things they could take for granted. They were so convinced of their own power that they never questioned what would happen if you ever found your strength. Now, they are left with nothing but the remnants of a relationship that was built on lies, manipulation, and a complete lack of appreciation. They don't realize that the moment you left was the moment they sealed their fate. They thought they could afford to take you for granted, to mistreat you, to keep you on the back burner. But now, in the wake of your departure, they are left to see the truth. You were never the fool. You were never the weak one. You were always the one who had the power, and they wasted their chance to keep you in their lives. They didn't see it coming. They didn't realize that all their small slights, all the moments they took you for granted, were building up, accumulating into something that could no longer be ignored. They thought you would take it, that you would stay and endure their lack of respect. But what they fail to recognize is that you are not a passive character in their story. You are the protagonist of your own life, and you were never meant to play the supporting role in theirs. You were always meant for greater things, things they couldn't give you, things they didn't understand. And now, they are left to pick up the pieces. But they won't be able to. You can't just undo the damage of years of neglect, manipulation, and arrogance. You can't fix something that was never whole to begin with. They can pretend they didn't care. They can lie to themselves and try to justify their actions. But deep down, they know what they've lost. They know that you were the one thing in their life that could have brought them peace, love, and stability. They know that they took it for granted, and now they will never get it back. There's a dark kind of justice in your departure, isn't there? It's not about revenge, not about trying to make them suffer for what they've done. It's simply about them facing the consequences of their own ignorance. They pushed you away. They thought they could replace you, that they could find someone who would accept their mistreatment without question. But now, they are alone, haunted by the ghost of what they once had. They didn't realize that you were the anchor, the one who kept their world together. Without you, everything falls apart. The cracks in their facade begin to show, and they are left to deal with the emptiness they try to fill with shallow distractions. And so, they face the darkness of their own creation. They didn't realize it was their final opportunity to hold on to you, to appreciate you, to treat you with the respect and care you deserved. They were too blinded by their own pride, too consumed by their own sense of superiority, to see that the moment you walked away was the moment they lost everything. It's a hard truth for them to swallow, and they may never truly understand it. They may never be able to admit to themselves that they drove you away. But deep down, they know. They feel it. They can't escape it. And as they struggle to put their broken world back together, you stand free. You stand stronger than ever before, a force they can never control. You have taken your power back, and in doing so, you have reclaimed your life. You have shown them that you are not the weak, desperate thing they thought you were. You are not something to be used and discarded. You are a person of strength, of integrity, and of value. And they will never forget the day you left, the day they realized it was their final opportunity to hold on to you before losing you for good. Before losing you for good, they lived in a state of comfort, nestled in the warmth of their misguided certainty. They took you for granted, believing that your love, your presence, your loyalty were things they could manipulate at will. They assumed that no matter how many times they ignored your needs, belittled your worth, or played their games, you would always be there, always forgiving, always waiting. But what they didn't realize was that everything has its breaking point, a moment where even the most patient heart reaches its limit. You reached that limit, but they never noticed. They were too caught up in their own world, too busy feeding their egos and pursuing their shallow desires to understand the depth of your silence. You weren't just quiet, you were calculating, preparing for the day you would walk away, for the day you would finally see that there was nothing left for you to hold on to. And when that moment came, when you walked away, when you left them behind with nothing but their empty promises and broken words, they couldn't comprehend it. They were too late, too blind, and now they face a reality that they could never have imagined. You, the one they thought would forever be bound by love, loyalty, or even fear, had finally broken free. The hold they thought they had on you was nothing more than a fragile illusion, one that collapsed the moment you realized your own worth, the moment you decided that enough was enough. They didn't realize that you weren't theirs to control. They didn't understand that they were playing with fire, thinking you would never ignite. They underestimated your strength, mistaking your patience for weakness. They believed that you would always be there, waiting for the scraps of their affection, for the moments when they felt the need to throw you a bone. And when they gave you nothing, when they neglected you, when they failed to appreciate you, they didn't realize that they were slowly eroding the foundation of whatever connection they thought they had with you. It wasn't an immediate shift. No, it was a slow, quiet realization that grew in the shadows of your mind. It wasn't one single moment of betrayal, but a culmination of many small, overlooked moments that eventually became too much for you to ignore. They thought you were too attached, too dependent, too desperate for their love to ever walk away. But in truth, you were just biding your time, waiting for the exact moment when you would no longer need them. And when that moment arrived, when the scales tipped, they found themselves trapped in the chaos of their own doing. The irony of it all is that they thought they had you figured out. They thought they knew your every move, that they understood the depths of your devotion. But they didn't know you at all. They didn't understand the strength that lay dormant within you, the resolve that would one day surface and break through the shackles of their manipulation. They didn't realize that your love was never unconditional. Your loyalty was never blind. It was earned, and it was a gift, not a burden. They believed that they could take your kindness and your patience and twist it into something they could control. But in reality, they were playing with a force they could never master. And when they finally realized the gravity of their mistake, it was already too late. The door was closed, the opportunity lost, and they were left outside in the cold, with nothing but the echoes of their regret ringing in their ears. They thought they could walk all over you, that they could take and take, without ever giving back. But what they didn't understand was that the very thing they thought was their power over you, the things they believed they could control, were the very things that would one day lead to their downfall. They didn't realize that you were never trapped. You were never bound by the invisible chains they thought they had wrapped around your heart. You were just waiting for the moment when you would be strong enough to break free, and that moment came. It came when you realized that your life, your happiness, and your peace were more important than anything they could ever offer. Now, as they face the truth of what they've lost, the silence that once felt like a lullaby has become a haunting reminder of their arrogance. They didn't realize it was their final opportunity to hold on to you before losing you for good. And in the wake of your departure, they are left to pick up the pieces of their broken self-esteem, the remnants of their shattered world. They will never fully understand what went wrong. They will try to convince themselves that it wasn't their fault, that you just grew distant, that you changed, that circumstances were to blame. But deep down, they know. They know that they had the chance to make things right, to appreciate you, to love you the way you deserved, and they failed. What they don't realize is that in losing you, they are not just losing a person. They are losing a part of themselves, a reflection of the love and care they could never give themselves. Your presence in their life was a mirror, a reflection of what they could have been if they had allowed themselves to grow, to evolve, to love deeply and truly. But now, in the absence of that mirror, they are left with nothing but their broken image, their empty promises, and the realization that they were never truly capable of giving you what you needed. The tragedy of it all is that they will never be able to undo what they've done. They will try to fill the void with distractions, with new faces, with empty relationships, but it will never be the same. They can try to replace you, but they will never find someone like you. You were unique in your love, in your dedication, and in your strength. They will search for a shadow of what you were, but they will never find it. And every time they feel the emptiness creep in, every time they reach out for something that can never fill the void, they will be reminded of the one person they took for granted, the one person they could never replace. They will always wonder what went wrong, but they will never truly understand. They will never see the full picture because they were too blinded by their own sense of entitlement, too consumed by their own needs to realize that they had a chance to make things right, and they threw it away. And as they struggle in the aftermath, as they try to rebuild the life they thought they could control, you stand free. You stand as a testament to the strength they never saw, to the power they never understood. You are no longer bound by their manipulation, no longer trapped in the cycle of their lies. You are free to live your life, to chase your dreams, to find peace and happiness in ways they never allowed you. And in the quiet of your freedom, in the strength of your independence, they will feel the weight of their own failure. You gave them a chance. You gave them multiple chances. You offered them your heart, your trust, your time, and your love. But they never appreciated it. They never understood it. And now, they are left to pick up the pieces of a life that was never theirs to control. The finality of your departure has set in, and no amount of regret, no amount of apology can undo the damage they've done. The chance is gone. They didn't realize that it was their final opportunity to hold on to you before losing you for good. And in that loss, they will learn the hardest lesson of all, that they were never the ones in control, and that their arrogance and pride have cost them everything. That hollow, pervasive feeling they now experience is the culmination of their own hubris. They held on to it so tightly, convinced it was their greatest asset. They believed that pride, this inflated sense of superiority, was the shield that protected them from vulnerability, from having to admit any fault, any flaw, any mistake. It was the mask they wore to hide their insecurities, to convince the world and themselves that they were untouchable. But now, as they face the wreckage of their own choices, they understand that it wasn't strength that their pride offered them, it was weakness. It was the thing that blinded them to the most obvious truth, the thing that caused them to underestimate you, to believe they could mistreat you without consequence. And now, as they stand in the ruins of the life they thought they controlled, they must face the undeniable reality. Their pride has cost them everything. You, on the other hand, are not bound by that pride. You never were. You've always understood that true strength doesn't come from arrogance. It doesn't come from putting others down to elevate yourself. True strength comes from understanding your worth and knowing when to walk away, when to say enough is enough. It comes from knowing that your peace, your happiness, and your dignity are not things to be compromised, not things to be sacrificed for the sake of someone else's ego. When they thought they could take you for granted, they didn't realize you were waiting for the exact moment when their pride would be their downfall. You were watching, you were aware, and you were prepared for the day you would have to break free. That day, that moment, when you walked away, wasn't just the end of a relationship or a situation. It was a reckoning. You weren't the one who needed to learn a lesson. They were. They needed to understand that their pride, their arrogance, had destroyed everything they had with you. They needed to understand that they had pushed you to the edge, tested your limits one too many times, and that now, in the wake of their mistakes, they would have to face the consequences of their actions. They would have to live with the weight of their decisions, knowing they could have held on to you, could have made things right, but their pride stood in the way. And now, it was too late. They had no one to blame but themselves. You see, what they failed to understand was that love, respect, and loyalty are not given freely without cause. They assumed that just because you loved them once, you would continue to do so endlessly. They thought your devotion was a permanent fixture in their lives, something they could take for granted without any effort. But what they didn't realize is that love is a fragile thing. It can only endure when it is nurtured, when it is treated with care, and when it is returned in kind. Your love for them wasn't a given, it was a choice, one that you made over and over again, despite their behavior. But eventually, you realized that love alone wasn't enough. It wasn't enough to keep you tethered to someone who didn't see your worth, who didn't value what you brought to their life. And so, you let go. They were not prepared for that. They weren't prepared for the moment when you would recognize that you were worth more than the scraps they threw your way. They never thought for a second that you would stand up for yourself, that you would walk away from them, from all the promises they never kept, from all the words they used to manipulate you. They were so wrapped up in their own sense of superiority, so confident in their control over you, that they failed to see the shift happening right in front of them. You were changing, you were evolving, you were starting to see yourself as worthy of more. And when the realization hit, it was too late for them to do anything about it. Now, they are left in the aftermath of their actions, surrounded by the consequences of their own choices. Their pride, once a source of power, has turned into their greatest weakness. They will never understand the full extent of what they've lost. They may try to make amends, to apologize, to convince themselves that they can fix things. But the truth is, they cannot. They cannot undo the damage done. They cannot repair the relationship that has been fractured by their arrogance, by their disregard for your needs, by their belief that they could push you to the edge without consequences. They didn't realize it was their final opportunity to hold on to you before losing you for good. And in losing you, they've lost a part of themselves, a part they will never recover. The hardest part for them to swallow is that you won't be coming back. They will have moments where they try to convince themselves that you'll return, that you'll give them another chance. They will look back on the moments of good times, the small instances where they felt your love, and they will try to recreate that, to call it back into existence. But the truth is, they will never be able to recreate what they lost. They will never be able to go back to the way things were, because those things were built on false foundations. They were built on their pride, their manipulation, their selfishness, and those things cannot sustain a relationship. They cannot sustain anything of value. They may try to replace you. They may seek out someone else, someone who can fill the hole you left behind. They may find someone who will tolerate their pride, their games, their mistreatment, but they will never find someone like you. You were unique. Your love, your loyalty, your strength were one of a kind, and they will search for that in others, but they will never find it. They will never find someone who sees through their pride, who recognizes their weakness and still chooses to love them. You were the only one who was able to do that, and they pushed you away. Now, as they stand in the wake of their own arrogance, they are left with the reality that their pride has cost them everything. They are left with the emptiness that comes from knowing they destroyed the one thing they could never replace. And in that emptiness, they will try to fill the void with distractions. They will throw themselves into their work, their friends, their new relationships, but nothing will ever fill the space you occupied. They will always feel the absence of the person they took for granted. They will always be haunted by the thought that they could have done better, could have been better. But their pride blinded them to the truth until it was too late. They may try to move on, but they will always carry the weight of their pride. It will follow them like a shadow they can never escape. And every time they think of you, every time they hear your name, they will be reminded of the moment they lost you, the moment they allowed their pride to push you away. It will eat away at them, slowly, silently, until they realize that their own ego has cost them everything they held dear. They will be left with nothing but the hollow remnants of a relationship that was never what they thought it was, never what they hoped it would be. And in the end, they will have no one to blame but themselves. As for you, you are free. You are stronger than ever. You have learned the hardest lesson, but it has made you more resilient, more aware of your worth. You have walked away from something that could never fulfill you, something that tried to break you, and you have emerged victorious. You are no longer bound by their games, no longer trapped in the web they wove around you. You are free to live your life on your own terms, free to find the peace and happiness that they could never give you. You have learned that true strength comes from within, and now you stand tall, knowing that you are worthy of so much more than what they ever offered you. And as they continue to grapple with their own pride, with the consequences of their actions, you walk away unscathed, untouched by their need for control. You are free to rebuild, to rise higher, and to find the life that was always meant for you. They may never understand the full depth of what they lost, but you already know. You already know that their pride cost them everything. And in the end, you are the one who walks away, stronger, wiser, and free. In the end, their pride led to their downfall, and in the silence of your departure, they are left to confront the weight of their own mistakes. They failed to recognize that the opportunity to keep you was fleeting, and now they must live with the consequences of their arrogance. As they search for something to fill the void you left, they will never find it, because no one can replace what they lost. But you are free, stronger, wiser, and ready to build a life on your own terms. They didn't realize it was their final chance to hold on to you, and now it's gone forever.